Comment comptez-vous favoriser des solutions africaines pour assurer une prévention, une gestion et une résolution efficace et durable des conflits? Et comment comptez-vous accélérer la poussée de l'Afrique à la sécurité des Nations Unies?
Your question, dear candidates. Despite the AU's aspiration to silence guns by 2020, conflicts persist. How will you foster African solutions to ensure effective and durable conflict prevention, management, and resolution? And how do you plan to accelerate Africa's push for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council? Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed candidates, the first to answer this round of questions will be His Excellency Raila Odinga. You have 4 minutes, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Well, silencing the guns on the continent. As you know that in 2013, the AU met and passed a resolution to silence the guns by 2020. We are today in 2024 and the guns are not silent. They're very loud, roaring all over the continent. We need to address the causative factors of these conflicts. There are some which are conflict caused by poverty or deprivation. Some of them by conflict within the society. Again, things like ethnicity and so on. Some of them are externally influenced or promoted. Some are religious and so on. So they're not a common factor. But what you need to do is to address the causative factors which could translate into these conflicts throughout the continent. And this is what I will do myself. First, as you know that our African countries are not at the same levels of development. Those which are more developed, like for example in terms of governance, there are some areas where you have got exclusions of people, and as a result of this, there are some people who move to use other means. We need to find a way of creating an environment or dialogue within our societies so that we can be able to prevent these differences, conflict ending up into violent confrontation between the various groups. We don't need to put a time span, but I'm sure that it is possible to end these conflicts and stop the guns by 2035, in my view. The other one is the issue of Africa's representation on the Security Council. This is something that has been long overdue. As you know that the UN was formed at a time when most part of Africa were colonies. And that's why the UN structure as today does not deal with the realities of the world today. And the situation where you have 5 countries sitting in the Security Council with veto powers and Africa is not represented, a continent with 1.4 billion people, is not tenable and it's not accessible. And that's why I'm not going to talk about Africa's representation, but we're going to insist that Africa must get 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council. This is only fair because we are a continent of 55 sovereign nations. We cannot be excluded when Europe has got 3 permanent representations on the Security Council. Permanent representation with the veto powers is a must for Africa. And this I'm going to insist when I'm elected. If the heads of state of Africa sees fit that I should lead this, I will work together with all the leadership of the continent to ensure that the continent gets a fair treatment on the international scene.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Candidate from Kenya. Et maintenant, mesdames et messieurs.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the response from His Excellency, the candidate from Djibouti, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssouf.
Silencing the Guns is a flagship program, one of the 15 that our leaders have endorsed years ago. And then they put a number of mechanisms and structure around this flagship program so that peace becomes a reality on our continent. The first structure is the African peace and security architecture. And then we have the strategy that we all know, Silencing the Guns. And to support this strategy, the African Union put in place a number of mechanisms. One of them is the Peace and Security Council. The other one is the Committee of Elders, the Committee of Chief of Staff. We have the Peace Fund, and we can rely on every kind of mechanism. So why is peace is not, let's say, a reality on the ground on our continent? There are a number of reasons. One of them is the political will of countries. We have to be outspoken and frank. We make decisions at the Peace and Security Council level. These decisions are not implemented. Our Peace and Security Council is not proactive. It is reacting to crises when they occur and happen. This has to change. And I'm sending a message to our member countries saying this has to change. The number two problem that we have to face is our standby forces. We have them on the papers. Of course, sometimes we can mobilize them, but they lack resources. We are still relying on foreign partnership for our resources. Let me give you an example. AMISOM. Since 2007, AMIS has been financed by the European Union and the United Nations up to 2.7 billion euros. Now, financial resources are critical. Why should we have the money so that we can operate on crisis ground on the continent? Because without money, we cannot deploy our standby forces. Without money, even the committee of mediators cannot go and discuss with the stakeholders. They sometimes wait for the tickets, the per diems, days and days and days. It's very critical that the Peace Fund, in which we have $400 million, that the Commission and the PRC, get to the compromise situation where that money could be used for peace on the continent. So far, only the interest of the 400 millions are used. And I'm really shameful when I say, DRC have been given 1 million for a peace, issues through this fund. And they have given to, another country 1.5 million. It has to change. We need the authority from the member countries so that we can use this money, the $400 million, to keep peace on our continent. There are so many other bottlenecks that needs to be handled very quickly. But money is one of them. The Peace and Security Council mission is the second problem. And then we have a third one. This one also has to be underlined very, very seriously. When a crisis happens, I give you the example of Somalia. I've been around for some time. I've been dealing with this problem for many years. When there is no unity of purpose between the countries around this country, neighboring countries, this country will never stand on its feet. That's what we are experiencing today in the Sudan. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, millions displaced. Neighboring countries are still fighting on the Sudan, and the African Union and IGAD are watching.
Sorry, sir, your time is up.
Okay, sorry, because I can talk hours about this
No
issue.
problem, sir. Thank you so much for your contribution. And ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, especially to our esteemed candidates, if you go beyond the time, I will be forced to interrupt, and I don't want to do that, so please forgive me. May we kindly have our last candidate, His Excellency Randriamandrato, to respond to the question. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Faire taire les armes et
Silencing the guns and issues relating to peace and security in general actually are due to so many things. It's not like turning on a switch or switching it off, not on and off a switch. No, there are several factors that have to be taken into consideration, and that is the reason why the African continent and the African Union have been challenges to silence the guns. But we have to resolve our conflicts peacefully, and this is one of the principles of the African Union, just like the principle of non-interference. So this is an aspect that we all have to actually look at. When exactly do we talk about non-interference or non-indifference, and how do we use them to silence the guns? But that is the situation in which we find ourselves in. And if I am chosen by the heads of states and government as chairperson of the commission, I will make sure that the African Union Commission would actually work towards resolving our conflicts peacefully, because we have that in the Constitutive Act of Africa, of the African Union. So we have the Peace and Security Council, we have the Peace Architecture of the African Union, but we also have the United Nations Security Council. And then bilaterally, we've got efforts that are underway, and we've heard about progress in some areas, in some regions where we have long-standing conflicts. And then we also have the opportunity of ensuring that there is solidarity with the United Nations, the African Union and the United Nations. This is a framework that could actually enable us to sit down with the international community and talk about crisis in Africa. Why should we only talk about the crisis in Ukraine? Why not talk about the crisis in Sudan and crisis in other African countries? So we are talking about financing peace missions, but there is also a program that actually wants to see the program of the United Nations, that is the SDGs, aligned with Agenda 2063. And then we also have the 10-year plan of our public institutions in charge of working at a national level, but we are talking about the justice systems in our respective countries. Now, concerning the two permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council, I think here in Africa we all know the importance and the urgency of having these two seats, and we have to seize this opportunity because we are actually at the end of 2024, and so we have to act very fast in 2025, and this should be the mantra of the African Union in 2025. And so of course we have to make sure that we can actually speak with one voice on the choice of who will represent Africa on the United Nations Security Council. It's not going to be easy. It will be up to the heads of states to decide who will be the continent's representative. And I will conclude to say that, like this morning, I read in the newspapers the problem between Ethiopia and Somalia, and this was being resolved by Turkey. The mediator is Turkey. Let us be responsible. Let us be serious. The African Union should be that person doing the mediation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, candidate from Madagascar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our second round, and without any transition, we are going to step into the third round, and we are going to discover the question. Anita, you have the floor.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move into the third round. Once again, if you're just joining us, these questions have been formulated by an independent panel, and the questions will be open and seen only at the beginning of the round, as I'm doing right now. Esteemed candidates, on the topic of reviving Pan-Africanism and countering external influence, Pan-Africanism is declining, and external powers and internal divisions challenge Africa's integration efforts. What specific steps will you take to rekindle the spirit of Pan-Africanism, counter big power politics on the continent, mobilize African countries behind a common integration agenda, ensure resource self